Good afternoon. Wonderful to see all these familiar faces. And we do have one new face, and that is Linda Zisk, who is the National Director of Region. She's waving. Linda has been on board with JTS for about a year and a half now, 2 years. Oh my goodness, doesn't seem like that. Linda is based in Florida. We haven't seen each other in person for a while. She lives across town, but we're really happy to have Linda in the class today. So some of you may already be signed up for a day of learning that starts at 10 a.m. If you're not, we will post that link in the chat. If you'd like to sign up for one or all of the classes, you're welcome to do that. But that'll start at 10 o'clock. So we'll have, we'll conclude close to that time. So again, welcome. And
one question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Did
you have to pay for these sessions?
No. These sessions are, part of what we offer to the community.
I mean, is this one with Arnie Eisen? Is this one with Arnie Eisen at 10 o'clock? Is this the one with Eisen at 10?
This is
You're not going to get Arnie Eisen at 10, but you're getting Berkowitz at 10. I'm sorry.
Right.
Oh, no. That's great. Okay, send me the link.
Right, so the lineup, I'll just tell you quickly: Rabbi Berkowitz, Rabbi Julia Andelman, Rabbi Bert Vasotsky, Rabbi Jan Urbach, and Dr. David Kramer. So it's, basically every other hour throughout the day, you can join as many or as few as you'd like. And there'll be an opportunity to make a gift. Certainly, we hope you use the occasion to do so, or call me up and we'll talk about a gift.
Thanks. So send the link. I appreciate it. Thanks, Son.
Absolutely. All right.
Bye-bye.
Good afternoon, Rabbi.
Good morning, North America. Boker Tov. It's, again, great to be back in our virtual Beit Midrash. I feel like it's been a lifetime since we've been here together. And it's Yom HaAtzmaut, it's Israeli Independence Day that takes the guilt for that. But I will tell you that JTS had a magnificent concert on Yom HaAtzmaut with the Tandu sisters. I know we had some of you present for that concert, and they were just full of love and life and celebration. And I think the best part of that concert was having their parents in the studio here in Jerusalem, and their parents jumping in at the end to perform with them. What you didn't see is not only did their mother perform with them, but their father performed in an encore for the people that were present in the studio here in Jerusalem. So that was a great joy. If you didn't have a chance to see it, I do have the Zoom recording of it, and I'm happy to pass that along to anyone who's interested. So just let Carolyn know, and we'll be sure to get that link to you so you can watch it in your own time. As we begin, I want to say that it would be rabbinic malpractice not to acknowledge the just verdict that was issued in the Derek Chauvin trial, which concluded. How appropriate it is that we should be witnesses to this verdict in the week of Mot-Kedoshim, where we learn the following in Leviticus 19, verses 15 through 16. Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat, lo tisa pnei da, lo te'adar pnei gadol, b'tzedek tishpot amitecha. You shall not render an unfair decision. Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your kinsmen fairly. Lo telech rachel ba'amecha, lo ta'amod al dam re'echa ani Adonai. Do not deal basely with your countrymen. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow. I am the Lord. It could not be said better. If ever there were harmony between Torah and the real world, it's this week. And it's what we see in this week's Parsha. And to quote from a WhatsApp message sent to me by the Rabbi known as Diane Wall, quote, a small but important victory in our fight against systemic racism. I want to say it's not just our as in America or our as in Jewish, but I would say our as in humanity. So with that, I want to shift from the Wool Rebbe to another great Rebbe, and that is Yeshayahu Leibovich. Okay, did we lose Diane, by the way? After all of that, we lost Diane?
Like we did.
Okay. Anyhow.
Just lost her video. She's still there.
Okay, you can all, I don't see Diane Wall here. I see Diane Trotterman, Nancy, but not Diane Wall. So anyhow, you can all share with Diane Wall that she was quoted. What I want to do in this session, I quoted those verses because we are not going to be addressing those verses explicitly in our learning this morning. Rather, I want to take a look at what I consider to be the most challenging of mitzvot. But before I do that, I want to share with you my favorite piece of Torah from Yeshayahu Leibovich, Zichrono Livracha. Yeshayahu Leibovich was a great scientist, a biochemist in Israel, biochemist, physicist, remarkable, brilliant human being, a Renaissance man, I would say. His greatest claim to fame is that he was the brother of Nechama Leibovich, who was one of the Jewish people's great Torah scholars. If you don't have her 5-volume Parsha commentary on your Jewish bookshelf, you should definitely have that. I encourage you to get it. It's a wonderful resource to go to week in and week out. So that was his very, very famous sister. And Yeshayahu Leibovich, in addition to his brilliance in science and Torah, was a very, very important social critic in Israel. And what I want to share with you is his commentary on the very, very beginning of our Parsha, which also connects to another Parsha, and that is Parshat Korach. Right? What do we know or remember about Korach? What is Korach famous or infamous for? What does he do? I know it's in the book of Numbers, Bamidbar. We haven't gotten there yet. Toby?
He challenged the authority of Moses and Aaron, fomented a rebellion, and ended up being swallowed by the earth.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so not excellent what Korach does, but excellent what Toby shared with us about Korach. Korach is the infamous rebel that goes up against Moshe and Aaron and challenges their authority. And when he challenges their authority, we are told, Vayikalu al Moshe ve'al Haron, he goes up against Moses and Aaron, Vayomru alehem rav lechem, and he says to them, right, you have overstepped your authority. Ki kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim, because the entire congregation of Israel is holy, he says to them, right? And you are not holier than thou. So at first glance, when we look at the claim of Korach against Moses and Aaron, it seems like it's a desire for democratization of leadership in Israel. But what Yeshayahu Leibovich points out brilliantly is, he says, that's not their claim at all. That's not their desire at all. They make the claim that the entirety of Israel is holy. And what's problematic about that? What's problematic is when you come to the beginning of our Parsha, Parshat Kedoshim. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God speaks to Moses and says, Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, speak to the entire congregation of Israel, ve'amarta elehem, and say to them, Kedoshim tihiyu, you will be holy. So what is the difference between the beginning of Kedoshim and Korach's claim? It's a nuanced difference, but a very, very important difference that Leibovich points out. What do you notice about the difference? Susan?
You're muted, Susan. We just need you to unmute.
Okay. The language of the phrase "you will be holy" implies something that has not yet happened.
Excellent. Very, very good. Okay, and that is what Yeshayahu Leibovich latches onto. The fact that Kedoshim says, Kedoshim tiyu, you will be holy, meaning that holiness will come in the future. It's a lifelong journey. Okay, that's what holiness is all about. And Korach's claim is that we are inherently holy as Israelites, as Jews. In other words, we are simply born that way. And what Leibovitch says, Korach just doesn't get it. Holiness is a lifelong journey, right? That's what we all need to understand. And that's what Kedoshim is teaching us in this week's Torah reading. Right? I also need to point out it's a double Torah reading that we have, Aharei Mot-Kedoshim. I'm not talking about Aharei Mot. We're focusing on Kedoshim. And the reason that I love Kedoshim so much is because that it really is an instruction booklet of how to be holy in one's life. Okay, it seems Diane Wall has just returned now in this moment. Here she is.
Okay. Easy.
Diane, you missed
had
it.
no
You totally
Wi-Fi.
blew it. You had no Wi-Fi. And I want you to know, I quoted you, Diane. You totally blew it.
Oh my God, I'm in the Bible now.
I quoted that amazing message that you sent me yesterday. And we started by talking about how appropriate it is that we're talking about Kedoshim because of verses 15 and 16. So I'm not going to backtrack, but just know that I very much appreciate the message that you sent, and I quoted you as Rabbi Diane Wall.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
we're
Okay,
now
good.
jumping into the core of our learning.
Okay.
Okay, so remember, I started with Leibovitch because I want you to keep in mind that the mitzvah is Kedoshim Tihiyu, you will be holy, meaning that holiness is a lifelong journey, and that's what we need to pay attention to as we go forward. So the mitzvah that I do want to focus on for this session is Leviticus 19 verses 17 and 18. So let's go there now. I am going to share screen as we always do. I know some of you probably printed it out as well. So let's take a look at this very, very challenging mitzvah that I want to focus our conversation on. Torah teaches in Parshat Kedoshim, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, hocheach tochiach et amitecha, velo tisa alav chet, lo tikom velo titor et bnei amecha, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ani Adonai. You shall not hate your kinsman in your heart. Reprove your kinsman, your countryman, but incur no guilt because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Okay, so before we take a look at all the commentary, before I open the floodgates, I want to hear from you what you learned from these two very, very brief verses.
Barbara?
I just have one. I'm here to learn today because there is so much I think is amazing to learn, but this was definitely before social media and all of the things that incur. I mean, I live by love your neighbor, love your fellow as yourself. I think that is one of the most important things we should all remember, is that every life is precious. Every life should be honored. Every person should be respected to the point. But all I want
Good, Barbara.
to say
So you wait. So okay, no. So you highlighted the latter part of
yes,
the two verses.
I did.
Okay. Who wants to share
that's
something?
all I did, but that's why I'm here to listen today more than to comment, because I'm very interested in people who are much more knowledgeable than me, what they have to say. But I like to focus on the very end of the sentence and say, I wish that was true today. Because of social media.
Thank you, Barbara. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Okay, who else wants to share something from the earlier part of these verses?
You know,
Sorry, Joan had her hand up first.
okay.
Okay, so I see all these verses as kind of connected. I mean, these two verses is connected. That love your fellow as yourself. Love has embedded in it the imperative to reprove. So I thought this is very interesting. It's not like this Christian, love your neighbors. It's much more nuanced. It's got a duty involved. Love.
Right. Very good, Joan. It's
reprove.
not, right. Exactly. It's not turning the other cheek. right? But rather, there's a very, very clear mitzvah here, a very, very clear commandment to give rebuke, right? To reprove our neighbor. Okay, so excellent that you're pointing that out, and that's why I say this is one of the most challenging mitzvot of all of Torah that we're being given here right now.
Can I ask a quick question about that? When you mentioned turn the other cheek, maybe sort of a philosophy of ideas question. When did the Christian way and the Jewish way diverge? Because they are very different. Was one a polemic against the other, and this might be too much?
No, I wholly believe that part of what Christianity was doing was articulating its polemic against rabbinic Judaism, right? Remember that the important piece that we all need to remember is that in its earliest stages, right, Christianity was a sect of Judaism. That's what it was. There were many branches or sects or streams of Judaism, and Christianity was one of them. And it's only much later that it begins to articulate and define itself in opposition to rabbinic Judaism and to Israelite religion. But one of the perspectives that later Christianity was arguing against was this fierce side of God, of Israelite God. It was like completely rejecting that notion of midat hadin, this God of judgment, and choosing in favor to go in the polar opposite direction, right? Creating solely a religion of love and rejecting all of the legalities of rabbinic Judaism. All of that goes out the window, and also the harshness of the image of God, right? That we believe is important for balance in this world.
Interesting.
Diane, then Nancy, then Arvin.
This whole thing, I don't know how to even put it into words, because I just looked up reprove, which means to reprimand or censure. Like if somebody says something bad, like an obscenity, you like to say to them, please do not speak to me in that tone of voice. I even remember when I was a kid at a job, and these men, they were longshoremen, so they had a different kind of language when they spoke. And I said, please do not speak like that in my presence. And I was like shocked when they said, okay, Diane, all right, we won't do that anymore. But when you talk about love your neighbor as yourself, I believe it was Barbara who spoke first. And basically that is how I was brought up, to respect anybody and anybody that walks on this earth with, but today, and I'm not saying anything against those who go in to become and do police work, but most of them are not Jewish. And the bottom line is, if Christianity is so much in talking about, the goodness of the other, why is it that there's so much hate within the police force against the other? If they're supposed to then be following this strong, Christian doctrine that talks about, following the steps of Jesus Christ. So I just don't understand. I found it very difficult to feel any kind of kindness towards people who just go and kill people without taking a step back.
Right. So look, Diane, I want to say that this isn't just a problem, with Christianity. This is a problem that we see, in all, tragically in all of the Abrahamic faiths. And I could tell you that within Judaism, there's definitely a stream within Judaism that wants to interpret the Hafta l'reacha kamocha as it only refers to the Jewish people, right? That's how they interpret, right? L'reacha, right? Who is your rea? Your rea is your Jewish neighbor, right? I as a teacher of Judaism rabbinics, completely reject this, and thank God. I want to believe I am in the majority of the Jewish world on this, that it doesn't only refer to, right, to your Jewish neighbor, but it refers to your country, you know, to humanity as a
Right,
whole.
but,
That's
yeah,
what I wanna read.
but the only reason that I brought up the police and saying that not as many Jews become, you know, policemen and women, but I'm just saying that look, the bottom line is we need such reform, period, you know, within this line of work, not any defunding of the police, but giving more and more money for all the different areas that have to be taken care of. But I am not saying anything about Christianity or Judaism. I'm just saying when you brought up, and the women before, you know, spoke about within Christianity and the love and the neighbor, that it's really something that it's kind of like they threw what they were taught, you know, like they threw it out the window instead of taking that moment to say, what the heck am I doing? I don't have the right to just take a life.
It's a problem, Diane, with how we relate to the other, right? And sadly, that problem exists everywhere. And it exists, I want to, you know, I need to say this, you know, in Israel, you know, the vast majority of policemen here are Jewish policemen. And there is systemic racism in Israel against Ethiopian Jews, right? You know, darker color, it absolutely exists here. And there have been plenty of incidents here. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, I'm taking back everything I said.
We better move on because I know we're tight on, we're just a little tight. And I know Nancy, Arvin, and Phil have their hand up.
I'll be brief. I just wanted to say that when I read this for the first time, it resonated with me that if you hate your kinsfolk in your heart and you don't behave as if you continue to love them, then what happens when you hate yourself for something you have done? If you aren't practiced in rebuking others and in forgiving others, then perhaps you won't be able to do that with yourself when the time comes. That's it.
A very nice reading of it, Nancy. Thank you. Thank you.
Arvin, then Phil.
I'd just like to look at the first part of the sentence. You are more familiar with the Hebrew than I am, but I had a completely different reading from the translation that's provided, and I wanted to ask about it. So when it says in the text, hocheach tochiach, what that to me implies is it would be sufficient if you said it once, but the double emphasis is you certainly better, hocheach tochiach, you better strongly, emphatically criticize, rebuke your neighbor. But then the English here says incur no guilt, as opposed to the Hebrew, which really I read to say, but basically don't hate, notwithstanding the rebuke. So I'm wondering why the difference in the tone from the translation from the Hebrew.
Wait, first of all, Arvin, I think you're misreading the lo tisa, and maybe you're reading it as tisna.
No, lo tisa alav chet.
Right. So how are you interpreting lo tisa alav chet?
Don't hate him.
No. It's not hate.
Sin. Don't.
Right,
It's
exactly.
Not a sin, pardon me?
Right. Lesate is to carry.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that, right, he shouldn't carry the sin upon himself. That's what it's saying.
But so
quite literally, that's what it's saying. Okay, incur no guilt because of him, right, is based on these words that say you shouldn't incur a sin as a result of that person. Okay, but it's very, very cryptic as to what that part of the verse means. Very cryptic. And we're going to see that in what the classical commentators show us. Who's next, Carolyn?
Phil.
Hi, I just wanted to add that in this, the question of who is the other, and in this time, it's very easy for us, especially with what's been going on in America, to consider the other outside of the Jewish community. But we have a lot of work. I would just add to that, that there's a lot of work, love your neighbor as yourself. We have a lot of work to do within the Jewish community as well. We don't know how to talk to one another also. So we're kind of, I think this statement is a magnificent one of not only boundaries with other communities, but also with ourselves.
Right. Excellent, Phil. And certainly that is precisely what we're feeling here in Israel too, precisely. Okay, I want to go on to the classical commentators and bring some of their voices, and then we will open it up for more conversation after that. Back into our shared screen. Okay, we scroll down to Rashbam. He is the first commentator we will take a look at. Rashbam is the grandson of Rashi. Rashi, the most prolific commentator of Torah. And look at what Rashbam shares with us. Do not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. If they have done something evil to you, do not behave as if you continue to love them, all the time setting an ambush for them in your heart. Such an attitude is unhealthy, but rebuke them for what they have done. And as a result, you will restore harmonious relations so that you will not incur guilt on their account in your heart. So what is Rashbam saying? Right? Bottom line of Rashbam is he is saying do not be duplicitous. Right? And psychologically what he's saying is very, very healthy. And it's a very, very sound approach that he's sharing with us here. It's not only much better to articulate a critique, right, of the person that wrongs you, but Torah is telling us that, and this connects to what Arvind said before about this business of hocheach tochiach, that it emphatically repeats this notion of rebuke, saying you are surely obligated to rebuke your fellow, to critique your fellow. Right? That's what Torah is telling us. Right? It's not just that it's healthy, as Rashbam would have us believe, right? But the point is that there's an obligation, an explicit obligation that Torah, religious obligation that Torah is putting on our shoulders. And Rashbam says that if we listen to what Torah is telling us, it will restore harmonious relations. It will restore balance in our relationships. Chizkuni, okay, on the same verse, look at what he shares. Right? Do not hate your brother in your heart. If it has come to your attention that someone has made negative comments about you, accused you falsely behind your back of wrongdoing, do not bottle your resentment up in your heart by hating him. You should rather remonstrate with your colleague about having wrongly accused you, asking him what prompted him to badmouth you. Perhaps once matters are in the open, you can demonstrate to your colleague that he completely misinterpreted one of your actions. Alternately, you will become aware that what had been reported to you as having been said by him about you was misrepresented and not meant detrimentally at all. Right? So in other words, either he was wrong or you were wrong. Thus, you will avoid hating him in your heart by suspecting him of something that didn't really happen. So according to Chizkuni, this is all about communication. It's about open communication. It's about being dan lakaf zchut. It's about giving others the benefit of the doubt. So he advocates approaching this individual who may have done wrong so that you can clear the air. Right? That's the punchline of what Chizkuni is giving us here. It's all about a reality check. Now Ramban, Nachmanides, look at what Nachmanides says. You shall not hate your brother in your heart, since it is the way of haters to hide their hatred in their hearts, as it is said in Proverbs, a hater makes his lips foreign. In other words, dissembles, hating on the inside, but speaking as if everything is okay. The verse mentions this common temptation, and then it states, you shall surely rebuke your kinsmen, as a separate commandment to teach the importance of ethical reproofs. Right? In other words, do not be two-faced. This is very, very similar to Rashbam's commentary. Right? And we can also say that it's the difference between what is often the American approach and what is the Israeli approach, right? For good and for bad, Israelis tend to wear their feelings on their sleeves, right? And they let you know it very, very quickly. You shall not carry sin for him means that there will be guilt upon you if your fellow sins, if your friend or countryman sins, and you had not reproved him. And the language of Onkelos, an early translation of the Torah, inclines to this understanding, as he says, that you not receive liability for what is his, that you do not receive punishment for what is his sin. When the verse says, you shall not hate your brother in your heart, it refers to when he has done something to you that goes against preferences. If this happens, you should rebuke him by saying, why did you do such and such to me? And thus you shall not carry sin for him. In other words, by covering up your hatred for him in your heart and not telling him. If you rebuke him, he will make amends with you or repent and admit his sin, and it will be atoned for him. And afterwards, it warns that you not take revenge on him and not bear a grudge in your heart about what he did to you. And it is likely that even if you do not hate him, you might still remember the sin inside. Therefore, it warns you to completely erase the crime and sin of your brother from your heart. Right? What Nachmanides is saying is that it potentially opens the gates of tshuva, of repentance, right? And that's why one needs to be open and honest. Okay, let's pause, take a breath, and I'm curious to hear your responses to any or all of these commentators.
Toby?
I'm curious because I had always understood those verses from what I had learned about them as not being quite so personal, that it wasn't so much, somebody says something bad about you and you resent it and now you've got to confront them, as it was if you see somebody about to violate Shabbat or you see somebody about to do something that is not permitted, or having done something that's not permitted, you are not to turn away, you are to say something to that person. And I'm wondering at the direction of this interpretation, which is very much a personal, individual to individual type of relationship.
Right, so I want to say to you, Toby, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim, right? Both of these approaches are the words of the living God, meaning it doesn't only refer to the religious realm, but it does also refer to, the very, very personal realm that you're flagging here. It very much has to do with that. You could see that the verse itself doesn't set constraints. It doesn't put boundaries on what we're talking about here. And when you read the classical commentary here, the rabbinic commentary, it's absolutely clear that we're not just talking about halachic matters here, right? We're talking about far more than that. And I know Stanley, our resident psychologist here, will tell us all how important it is to have healthy, open communication. Perhaps Rashbam was very, very avant-garde in his time, but certainly I believe that's the thrust of what Torah is telling us. You got to wear it on your sleeve. You got to put it out there because the worst thing that you can do is bottle it up and carry hatred inside of you. We all know that the only person that kills most is yourself. Not the one that the anger is directed at. Carolyn?
Naomi has her hand up, and we just need you to unmute, Naomi.
Thank you. Excuse me. I think that maybe we should define sin a little bit better, because I think if you get too broad here, I mean, every 10 minutes somebody could say something that you really don't like, and you can't confront everybody on everything. Otherwise, you won't get any work done. There has to be some limits on this. You can't be forever rebuking people about something that they said. A lot of things, you know, it's like Ruth, I think it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg's mother said, well, when you get married, maybe you should get a little deaf at the same time. I mean, you can't let everything go to your head. Otherwise, life becomes unimaginable. You know, we have to come off this very high and ethereal and wonderful thing where you're going to love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, that's my feeling about it. You have to live in the world.
Naomi, like anything else, you have to find the shvil hazahav. You've got to find the golden mean.
Well, I think we should define sin. I mean, a lot of this is about sin. All these things that you gave us about sin. But you know, my definition of sin is something that God has said this is sin, or is sin something that the whole population agrees is an egregious thing and should not be done. I mean, you can get to be a little bit too wide.
Part of that ties into what the issue that Toby was raising. It's both ben adam lemakom and ben adam lechavero. It's both, you know, transgressions against our fellow humans as well as transgressions against God that we're talking about here. But you know, also when you say sin, you know, my question to you is, you know, what part of these verses are we talking? Because if we're literally talking about, you know, where the appearance of chet is, right? The chet, the sin itself, refers to what happens if you don't rebuke the person, right? And the sin that these verses are talking, it could very well be one of the hatred that you hold inside your hearts that's eating away at you, or it could be the fact that you're sinning because you are not seeing yourself as responsible for the other. Okay, that's, you know, in a focused sort of way, you know, what sin refers to in these verses. Carolyn?
Stanley and then Larry. We just need you to unmute, Stanley.
Okay. Okay, I'm hearing a lot of things that that make me this is like, these are dangerous waters that we're kind of going into. I would say, you know, tread lightly here. This idea of rebuking people can lead to a break in communications and some real tension between people, and so I'm, you know, it's difficult. I don't know that there's any one rule that a person can follow here.
The difficulty that you're raising, Stanley, and I appreciate this difficulty, is, you know, it depends on the interpreters of Torah. You know, I mean, who it is, you know, because I would want to say that this refers to moral and ethical behavior that we're talking about.
Okay, and I am talking about communication between people.
Well, that too.
Okay, because, so do you want communication, or do you want to end communication with someone? I mean, because it could lead to that.
Very good point. Larry.
I agree with all of this. Open communication is fine. And to pick up what Stanley just said, you know, it's very nice to have open communication, but you do have to tread lightly. And frequently, this assumes two healthy human beings here that are open to communication. Sometimes you know that if you rebuke someone, you know the response that you're going to get. You know that it will cause more conflict. And even though you would like to get this out in the open, you know that it is not going to improve communication. It's going to cause umbrage. And sometimes you have to decide whether that friendship or that relationship is worth that kind of problem, or whether you just sort of consider the source and go back to our original comment that you love everybody for their being, but you may not like them. and just kind of consider the source and just say, this is open communication may not be the best thing for this relationship, and I value the relationship rather than rebuking somebody, and I'll just let it go.
Good. I want to go further in our source sheet. Larry, you were just channeling the great Rebbe, the Kli Yakar, who you're going to see in a moment. Very impressed, Rabbi Ephraim Lunchitz. So let's go a little further in the sources, and then we'll come back to our conversation. Okay, an excerpt from the Babylonian Talmud. Anyone who had the capability to effectively protest the sinful conduct of the members of their household, that is, read their family, and does not protest, is held liable for the sins of the members of their family and punished. If one is in a position to protest the sinful conduct of the people of one's town and fails to do so, one is apprehended for the sins of the people of his town. And if you are in a position to protest the sinful conduct of the whole world and you fail to do so, you are apprehended for the sins of the whole world. Important teaching from Tractate Shabbat. Right? This is about collective responsibility. We see these concentric circles going out from family, right, to town, right, to nation and the world, right? This ripple effect of responsibility that we have. And indeed, we saw that play out this past week. Moshe Chaim Luzzatto from Mesilat Yesharim. Look at what he says. The Torah commands us, you shall surely rebuke your fellow. Oftentimes, a person attempts to rebuke sinners at a place or a time when their words will not be heeded. When this happens, one actually causes them to breach even further in their wickedness, to desecrate the name of God and to add transgression to their sin. In such cases, the only pious response is to keep silent. Thus our sages of blessed memory said in the Talmud, just as it is a mitzvah to say what will be heeded, so too it is a mitzvah to not say what will not be heeded. Larry, here's the Kli Yakar. I know you'll appreciate this one. The Torah specifically says friend, right? Hocheach tocheach et amitecha, amit. It says friend, that you will surely rebuke your friend in order to exclude three categories of people who do not receive rebuke: the wicked, idiots, and mockers. This is why it says in the book of Proverbs, do not reprove a mocker, and don't bother speaking to an idiot. And if you reprove a wicked man, it will end up harming you. Right? How true is all of this? Right? And then, of course, we get to the great Rambam, Maimonides, as opposed to Nachmanides, who we saw earlier. Okay, and look at what Nachmanides says here. I'm going to begin with the second paragraph under 7 here. He who rebukes his fellow, whether it be regarding a sin committed between man and man, right, ben adam l'chavero, or whether it be regarding matters between humanity and God, it is essential that the rebuke be administered only between them both in private. And he shall speak to him calmly, employing soft language, telling her that she does not speak of it to her except for her own good, to bring her to a life in the world to come. In other words, Rambam is accentuating the importance of how we give rebuke. This goes to the core of why I said this is such a challenging mitzvah. And Rambam is telling us exactly how it needs to be done. It needs to be done privately. It needs to be done calmly. It needs to be done with soft language. Right? I think many of us would consider this to be common sense, but we need to hear this over and over and over again. If he received it attentively from him, it is well. If not, he should rebuke him a second and even a third time. So is the constant duty of a man to continue to rebuke his fellow, even until the sinner strike him and say unto him, I will not listen. he in whose power it is to prevent sin and does not take the means to prevent it, then she herself is ultimately overtaken by their sin, since it was possible for her to prevent them. And he goes on. One who rebukes a friend at the beginning, no hard word should be used against that person to shame him, for it is said, and thou shalt bear no sin upon him. Thus did the wise people say. You might think it was acceptable to rebuke him in such a way that his face will change, right? In other words, that you'll embarrass him. That's why the Torah reminds us instead, right? And you shall bear no sin upon him, for it is forbidden to put someone to shame, even in private, never mind in public. Okay, so let's pause there. A whole lot came out, and I want to open it up again. So we go back to our read, Carolyn.
Linda had her hand up from before, and then Toby, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Carolyn. I don't usually speak during these programs. However, this is very, very meaningful to me, and it's the way I grew up. My father taught me from an early age, silence equates approval. And I always took that very, very, it was a very strong statement for me about Lashon Hara, and also the only thing you have is your credibility. So when my credibility has been tested, I've always said something in a very respectful way, but I truly believe that if you don't say anything, you're as guilty as the person who is saying it.
Yeah, Linda, it's exactly what these sources are telling us, that silence is complicity, and we've got an obligation to speak up. One example that I will give you of this obligation, and it's, you know, all those of you in South Florida, it's right in your neck of the woods. I am sure you all know of the phenomenon in the Jewish world of agunot, of women who end up chained to marriages that they do not want to be in because their husbands refuse to give them a get, a bill of divorce, right? According to halakha, right, it's the man that must issue the get, right, the bill of divorce, and sometimes evil men will hold this over their wife's head, and they end up imprisoning their wives or ex-wives in a marriage they don't want to be, and this could go on for many, many years. You know, and thank God, the halachic world takes a very, very stringent line against this, to the point where one who refuses to give a get to his wife, one of the opinions in the Talmud is that person can be beaten until he gives a get. Right, the Beit Din can actually, you know, legally sanction this person being beaten until he gives it. So why am I telling you all of this? As background to say, Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg at the Boca Raton Synagogue led a demonstration in front of the home of a certain Aaron Silberberg, who refuses to give his wife Devorah a get. And when I saw this in social media, I was so proud of Ephraim Goldberg and his community that they were out there doing this, putting this person to shame, right? And making sure the entire world knows about this, right? That he's keeping his poor ex-wife in chains like this. But, you know, again, it ties into the point that Linda is talking about. This is an example of a community that refuses to be silent in the face of evil, and models their morals, ethics, values beautifully. You know, I commend them. They deserve our kudos for what they did.
Toby, and then Barbara.
Whatever I was going to say has been covered.
Okay, thanks. Barbara, and then Sue.
I go back to what I was saying in the beginning as far as the work of social media. It definitely has its positive aspects, but having heard from my children who are in their 40s, the amount of blame and shaming and accusing and that goes on in social media today is beyond. They think they're doing they're doing a rebuke, but they're not. What they're doing is causing even more problems. So when you talk about discussing problems calmly, I live by that, having been a teacher for many, many years. Any things that occurred had to be done diplomatically, privately, calmly, and resolved in a very appropriate adult-like manner.
Right, and
But
that's what the halakha is talking about, Barbara.
Exactly.
Look, they didn't envision a world in social media where it is so
Right.
easy to say hurtful things. You know, the moment that you have, you know, this distance, you know, you can sink your jaws into somebody,
Yes.
and it's very, very destructive. And that's the very, very dark side of social media that we see today. But it doesn't negate the importance of being able to give rebuke in
Exactly.
a healthy way, and that is face to face, calmly, as you're pointing
Right.
out.
And I don't think that you should not have a rebuke or a reproof. That is what they're saying is that is very necessary in order to move forward. You can't, because it'll just stew inside of you and grow, and the hatred and resentment will just grow. So it should be presented in a healthy manner. And
Exactly.
but I think that we are, as far as social media has its place and has its good aspects, but this is one aspect that I feel is awful.
Exactly.
The public.
Thanks. Sue and then Joan.
Just two small details, which is beautiful that this covers, is one I learnt quite young, that somebody mentioned, you know, rebuking if one wasn't doing things according to halakha, according to what God commanded. Apparently one should never ever stop somebody doing anything in public, because you shouldn't make them feel bad about, I don't know, I remember in my youth it was silly things like carrying an umbrella on Shabbat, or you should never ever tell them they're doing wrong. If you want to, just take them aside and tell them later on, but never in front of somebody. And a lot of people still do that, you know, tell us off for not doing the right things. And the other thing that somebody was talking about, education. I used to teach in a Jewish school, Orthodox school, that shall remain nameless in the UK, and the headmaster often used to really shame pupils in public, and that is so against halakha, no matter what they do. And so it's so beautiful that this passage that you're talking to us about, Matt, is telling us that we shouldn't do that. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks,
you,
Sue.
Sue.
Thank you. Joan? And we need you to unmute.
Just a quick question. So we're talking about the importance of communication and the necessity to rebuke. Why is it then that the response to Lashon Hara is isolating the person with the evil tongue? Is it that isolation after the whole process of rebuking has failed?
You're talking about you're referring to the Maimonides passage, Joan?
No, I'm not. I'm referring to something that might not even exist.
Okay.
I'm talking about.
No, I mean, look,
and isolating the person from the community, and I'm trying to reconcile that with our readings that we're talking about today.
Look, there's this sense that you give a person, you know, 3 chances, right, to respond to, you know, and, you know, it's not unlike 3 times, you know, you got 3 tries and then you strike out. You know, then it becomes, you know, very, very problematic. And, you know, oftentimes, you know, in the halachic world, you know, maybe a Rebbe who's a mediator will come in to try to make peace, but sometimes, you know, even that doesn't work. I think what's so important in all of this is to have an open heart. And if you've got that open heart, then, I think just about anything can be solved, almost anything.
Just want to ask one thing.
I saw Larry had his hand up too.
You're muted, Larry. And I just took
I thought it was
a
interesting
3-minute warning.
that this passage sort of sets the paradigm for current therapy, and I guess Stanley could probably comment more. But the fact that when you walk into therapy, you don't tell people you did this. You sort of express your feelings about it rather than attacking somebody first, sort of that active listening kind of thing. And that's really what this passage seems to be getting to not point your finger and yell and shame, but rather to express your feelings and tell them that there's a problem, but without accusing them, and telling them how it affects the relationship.
Right, absolutely. One final source that I want to share with you as we near the end here, and that is from Bereshit Rabbah. I love this very, very beautiful teaching, which says, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, a love without reproof, without rebuke, without critique is no love. Reish Lakish said, reproof leads to peace. A peace where there has been no reproof is no real peace. Did I leave you all speechless there?
No, I believe that if you truly love somebody, then you should feel free to comment and criticize in a healthy manner. I'm not saying tantrums, yelling, scream, but if you truly love somebody, or care about their feelings, or care about how they look to other people and to yourself, then it is important in a healthy, sensible, civil way to speak to them of something that either they might have done inappropriate, or even you might have done inappropriate. So I think I think it's beautiful.
Going to cut you off just because we are at 9:59. I know Diane had her hand up. If you had a quick question.
Just do what you have to. Just move ahead.
Okay. Sorry. If you want to send some follow-up messages through email or WhatsApp, Rabbi Berkowitz can answer them. So sorry we're running so tight, but Rabbi is starting another class in exactly like 30 seconds.
Okay, I better go to that one. All right, I'm leaving.
Okay. Thank you.
Continue,
we'll be sending out
Diane.
an email. Hold your questions, put them in writing, and we'll see everybody next week or maybe a little bit later today. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom all.
Shabbat shalom.
Be well.